but this was something different because it was the first time that I was like, oh my God, there are truly people out there like us. Because up until this point, I had seen maybe Jack on Will and Grace, the gay character from Mean Girls, and whoever else was in social, on pop culture at the time. But other than that, it was just side characters. And for once, it was like, oh my God, it's not just me and my 3 gay friends in our school. It's grown-ups, full adults all the way up to the age of my grandfather at this club. Like, this includes everyone. This is a bigger world than what I expected. I am not alone.
Hello, I am Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, the podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode, I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories they created there, and the people that they used to know. Today, we are talking about Pulse Nightclub in Orlando, Florida, which on June the 12th, 2016, became the site of the deadliest terrorist attack in the US since the September 11 attacks of 2001. And the repercussions were felt worldwide. I remember how shocking and scary it was to hear about these attacks and how that impacted on me and the way I went about my life and went to queer bars and was visible. But before it was the site of this tragedy, Pulse was a place where people came to meet like-minded queer folks, dance, be messy, and forget their regular lives. I caught up with leukemia warrior and makeup artist Jared Lipscomb, who grew up in Orlando, to talk about body image, first times, and sneaking into the club when you are underage. In lots of ways, this is a very serious episode because we're talking about a horrific tragedy. But in other ways, it's very joyous as we talk about all of the reasons why Pulse will have a special place in Jared's heart for all the time. This is a question like I usually end with.
Okay.
I'm going to start with this question. What do you think Orlando has lost since it lost Pulse?
Oh gosh, wow. Well, as someone who grew up within like the suburbs of Orlando and that area, I can say definitively it lost just a place that young people really gravitated to, young queer people who didn't feel like they had a place to go. Because Orlando, as gay friendly as the city and the metropolis can be, the outskirts and the surrounding small towns are so the opposite of that. They're so small-minded. So it was truly an escape. There are options for gay places in Orlando. Of course there are, because it's so gay friendly, especially now. But growing up, I'm 33 now, and at 19 and 20 years old, there were maybe 2 or 3 clubs that accepted kids under the age of 21, 18 and up clubs. And Pulse was one of them. So it really was one of those places that young people could go. Your senior year of high school, you're finishing up high school and you're exploring your sexuality. You had a place where you could go legally with your ID being 18 and up. And that was taken away, as well as the thought and the feeling of safety that we all just have had before you experience something so devastating as a mass, terrorist shooting. So that sense of safety's been taken away. I haven't gone back out in Orlando, although I live in Los Angeles now. Even when I go home to visit, I haven't gone back out in Orlando as I don't feel comfortable to do so. Still to this day, it's a mental, roadblock. So yeah, it's been changed, and it's been an impactful change.
Yeah. So I want to pick up on what you said about Orlando and the center being gay friendly, but the outskirts not necessarily being that way. And actually, maybe my question is more about Florida.
Okay,
Because
yes. There's a lot to discuss about Florida.
yes, for our international listeners, well, for anyone really, Florida is often seen as like the laughing stock.
It's like the genital wart on America's anus.
Except there's no cream for it.
Yeah, there's no cure, there's no cream.
So like, yeah, I mean, we see stories about like man having his face chewed off by a stranger, crocodiles like roaming the street. No, crocodiles.
Alligators
yeah. Roaming the street.
That is true.
Like, what is it like growing up in Florida? And what is it like growing up queer in Florida?
Well, funny enough, because of the close proximity to Orlando, even though I did have to stop for alligators, driving down the streets, and I'm not kidding. I mean, that was a very real thing of living near a swamp. It was the proximity to Orlando and to Disney World, which is such an epicenter for tourism. It was not as harsh as you would expect it to be. There was a theater program in my school. We were able to have access to larger Broadway shows, that would travel through the metropolises and whatnot. So growing up in Florida queer in the mid 2000s was not this terror fear that you might expect. However, the more north you go in Florida, the closer you get to the south of America, which is like that heartland you hear about, which is, famous for all the horrible atrocities in America, which is, the KKK and the slavery and all of that stuff. So northern Florida is actually a very scary part. And that's where you get those parts of the real extreme homophobia. And I went to college in northern Florida. So it was actually kind of a reverse situation where I went to high school was more accepting because it was closer to Orlando. Then I went to a college town further away from Orlando, more in the swamplands of the north. And that's when it was like, oh, Florida's some backwoods. These are some, deliverance people out here ready to fight and ready to be mad at you just for sounding gay. And, I'm not one who can hide being queer because my voice is queer. I'm queer. Just, I exude my queerness proudly. So it's not an embarrassment, but it's not something I can hide. I can't play straight. There's no trade going on here. So it's a weird mindfuck living in Florida because it's just so weird. You have Miami and Orlando and Tampa, and then in between these major metropolises, you have these small towns where bigots, reign supreme. So it's a weird dichotomy, and it's confusing at times.
And there's one town that is like the most populous queer town in America. Yeah. What is that?
I think it's Key West. I haven't actually been there, but yeah, there's so many pockets in Florida, which is what makes it so fabulous. It's definitely up in the Gulf of like the Mexican Gulf. And yeah, there's these little pockets where drag queens have fame beyond measure just in this small little town. And queer people kind of run it. And again, it's its own little entity. It's its own little pocket there, in the midst of the beach town, the coastal town. And that kind of sums up, it's a good metaphor for Orlando. It's like there's this safe pocket that you can find yourself in where you're totally accepted. And then you have to be careful because of everywhere else, which is really what Pulse was. It was a safe pocket for the people who were under 21 but above 18 to be able to go to a gay nightclub and experience gay culture anywhere within like the 2-hour radius of Orlando. It was that safe pocket. And, Florida does have some safe spaces despite all the news you hear coming out of it.
And so just quickly to help me understand, because obviously I've only ever lived in countries where the drinking age is 18. When the drinking age is 21, but there are still some clubs where you can go if you're 18. Is it just like everyone who's over 21 gets an armband so they can drink? Or are there other rules?
No, it's pretty much an armband or a stamp. They're pretty good about making it something that you can't copy. So it's either like a stamp or something that like if you don't have it, present. I think a stamp is the most common one, because if you don't have it present, or maybe if you do have it present, it's like so hard to wash off that they wouldn't question it. They have a couple of things in place. Yeah, so it's definitely I remember armbands and X's on my hand, but I just can't remember in which order, X means yes to drink or no. But anyways, they have a system in place that they try to keep it. But let me tell you, if it is an armband, you bring a little pair of nail clippers with you. You slice that little buddy, take some chewing gum, you can pop it right on, and then you can drink if it is a wristband.
Ooh, expert tip there.
Yes, expert tip. Chewing gum, baby.
But then, so those kinds of places, are they mostly young people, or is it quite mixed?
That is what was so amazing about Pulse, because it really was my only gay experience from 18 until 21. And then it continued to be my gay experience until I moved to LA. But it was so diverse, and they celebrated this diversity in ways that I had never seen growing up in small town Florida, USA. They had Latino nights. They had nights that celebrated different cultures. And they had, of course, just seeing a drag queen perform. They had these drag queen performances just like any bar would have. But for me, it was, groundbreaking. I had never seen that. This was pre-RuPaul being on TV and all of that stuff, like RuPaul's Drag Race. And so it was a very diverse crowd. I mean, I was sitting with, next to guys in their 50s and 60s having, friends hanging out after 40 years, and you had us freshly turned 18 trying to sneak a drink. So it was a very cool mix of people. Now, of course, nights focused on different things, but you were always welcome no matter what, as most gay clubs are.
So can we then talk about your first time there? Do you remember?
I do remember my first time at Pulse, and it's going to sell myself out a little bit because, and I'm only going to say this since it's closed, sadly, but I snuck in illegally at 17 years old. And so it was very memorable. It was me and some of my friends from high school. They, someone in high school was dating an older gentleman who had a connection to the nightclub.
Wait, how old are we talking? Is it creepy old?
Oh, no, like 21 old. 21, and my friend is 18 or 19 old. Uncreepy old. And but all, we were all over age, like we were all adults, like legally adults, but we were not 21. No, I was 17. Some of them were 21. Some of them were just over 18. It was a mumble jumble of us. Anyways, we snuck in the back door where the drag performers go in, and that was our way in somehow. Someone knew a drag performer, whatever. They let us in, and we walked in through the back. And even that is just such a scene from a movie, like burned into my memory because I had no experience of going to a club, and I had no experience with really queerness besides whatever I had seen on, TV spoofs of characters. And so I'm walking out this back dressing room, and you just can hear it, and you can start to feel it's warmer. And then the door opens, that back door opens, and you just see the lights are going off, and I'm seeing these men making out with each other and dancing with each other with no worry that they're gonna, it was insane. It was absolute insanity for the first time to see that. And I saw, I remember seeing a drag queen dressed as Catwoman, like the Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman, obviously.
Oh, yeah,
and
the gold standard.
Yes. And I was just like, excuse me? And I went up, and I don't even think phones hadn't even evolved to selfies yet. And I still somehow have a picture with this Catwoman drag queen somewhere in my files of, old Facebook photos. But it was just such a moment of walking in and seeing just this livelihood. And it wasn't just, I grew up vaguely religious, and so I was expecting a lot of depravity. I was expecting this to feel scared, or to see I'm gonna walk in and just see people just fucking everywhere, and I'm gonna get I'm gonna get an STD just by breathing the air.
So then were you did you feel let down then when that didn't happen?
That I didn't catch chlamydia by nose. No, it was just so wonderful. It was just not what I expected. And so it was oh my God, this is a place where you can go and truly be yourself. And that was that feeling that rushed over me. I was like, this isn't a bad place or a scary place where I'm going to catch, a disease, which really was the mindset of a lot of of
yeah,
my
yeah.
generation, how we were raised, because our parents, grew up in the AIDS crisis. So it was like, oh, this is a place where people are just loving. And that's what I felt instantly was the love. And as soon as Catwoman was nice to me, I was like, because, that can be intimidating going up to a drag queen. I know now after doing drag and like experiencing more larger drag shows, I'm like, oh, that's a very intimidating thing to do. But she was so sweet. And so whoever that Catwoman drag queen was, made me feel very welcome. Thank you.
You didn't
Thank you, Miss
didn't inappropriately touch her hair or anything, did you?
I did not make any faux pas, but luckily she had like a full-on leather suit, so there wasn't many faux pas I could make. And I was pretty timid back then. You could have grabbed her tits, I guess. Yeah. Luckily, that's not my...
That's not what you go to a gay bar for.
Yeah.
So can we talk then about Jared at 17?
Yes, let's do it.
So you knew you were queer. Mm-hmm. And you had a semi-religious upbringing.
Yeah.
What was the whole process of coming out like for you?
So my coming out story itself is very linear and simple. Like I said, I was...
boring. I'm here for trauma.
I know. I don't have drama from my family side. I will say this. We grew up very religious, and it was instilled in me that being gay was wrong. Mm-hmm. I had very young parents. And so at around 30 years old, because we're only about 20 years apart. So around 30 years old, which is my age now, they had to come to Jesus, if you will. And they said, oh my God, what are we doing in this, kind of crazy religion where we're instilling fear in our children? We're fire and brimstone. We're just focusing on trying not to go to hell, like living life really like that. Like we were focusing on not going to hell. And they had an awakening, and quickly we did a 180. And like I said, I was queer my whole life. It was just obvious, I feel uncomfortable saying that sometimes because I understand gender is not, gender's a construct and being gay is a sexuality thing. But I was inherently queer, and everyone knew it, and so when I finally came out at 15 years old, my parents were accepting. I had a harder time with the bullies, and that's where trauma, comes into play. And that's where being accepted came into play. And that's when you get those weird backwoods stories of Florida, where I'm being chased by, 15 cars with baseball bats from a guy who was convinced I egged his girlfriend's car, and they wanted to lash out at someone. So the easiest person to lash out on was the new queer in town, that kind that kind of behavior. So while it was very safe at home for me, and I'm very grateful for that, it was very hard in a lot of other ways. So it was, it was a wild time, and nonetheless.
And so this incident that you're talking about with the 15 cars, was that after you'd gone to university, or was that when you were still living at home?
That was still living at home in high school.
So even in that relatively
exactly, even in that small bubble where there's the theater kids and other gay kids, there's still that outskirts of the kids who grew up in a different way, who maybe didn't move from a big city, who grew up from, it really is kind of the swamplands, and they grew up in these kind of like backlands. And so you have these two forces at play. And for a majority of time, it was safe and sound for us queer people in my little town, but other times it would not be. And that was one of the instances that it was not.
And then so at school, were you out, or were you just kind of like, no one pay attention to me?
I met a group of theater kids who were out, and they encouraged me to come out because, again, it was apparent, and they said, if you ever, they brought it up in a very nice, delicate way, and just encouraged, or just let me know that they would be there for me no matter what. I can't remember the exact specific conversation, but it was very welcoming, and they were all openly gay. There was about 3 guys who were openly gay, and I believe 2 lesbians, and just seeing that, seeing 5 gay people in the school, they were still bullied to a certain extent, of course, but because there was this power in numbers, and because our theater program was well respected also, in America, they love, I don't know how it is there, but they love sports and winning prizes and all of that shit, trophies.
This is the other thing I was going to ask. I always hear about in American schools, the gay straight alliance, or some kind of club. And I just find it this really weird concept. Do those actually exist?
Oh my God. They do exist.
Like
They
what?
do
And so what do you like?
exist.
Do they just make posters and put them up around the school? Like what do they do?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if my school, by the time that I was out in my school, I don't know if they were still relevant, because I think it was a very much a generational response to like the Matthew Shepard incident and all of that stuff. So I feel like I think I missed that. I think my generation missed that boat a little bit in schools,
Okay.
but I remember them being like the remnants of the gay straight alliance club,
I just
that you
find
could
it,
join.
yeah,
Or
I just find it really fascinating. Like who, like, not that it's not a worthy cause or anything, but like who, if you were straight, like what incentive do you have to join that group? Like, I just don't get it. It's really bizarre.
I wish I had an answer for you. I don't know the type of people who are yeah, what incentivizes someone to be a straight ally or a straight person in the gay ally
Yeah, yeah, and
club?
like give up your time and stuff. Like it's just it feels like a lot. So then this this group talking to you and being like, oh yeah, we know you're queer. Were they like just really overt with it, or were they like skirting around the subject?
Hmm. It was a mixture of both, because at this point we had become so close as like the cheesy theater kids that you see in like Glee, like the choir kids. Like we were like that. So we were so close that it was a mixture of direct, like, hey, we know you're gay, but they didn't want to embarrass me because they had all been there before. So it was really like-minded. So it was a really welcoming, like, all you have to do is say it kind of vibe. They just said like, all you have to do is
Oh
say it, and
no,
then that's it.
that's terrifying.
Or no, just say it to them though.
No,
That's not, just say it to a
but like
friend.
just even just saying it for the first time is just like it's terrifying. It's like you just want someone to say, "Are you gay?" so you can be like, "Mm-hmm." And then that kind of like just takes away the pressure. I remember, so when I was at school, I kind of just rationalized it to myself and was like, I'm just going to get through. I'm just going to be like asexual. I'm just going to like be non-sexual for this period. And then when I like leave school, then I can just do whatever the hell I want.
But did you know you were gay at that point?
Yeah. So I figured out when I was
okay.
12. And I was just like, okay, just like survive for the next few years. And I like looking back now, there were so many like gay guys in my year at school that were like trying to be like, oh, hey, I'm gay too. And like have conversations with me about it. And I was just so like,
no way.
It was just so like, it wasn't even that I was processing it and just not wanting to have the conversation. I just was just like, just didn't figure it out.
When they were in the moment when they were coming up to you, did you know that's what they were doing?
No,
or was this a realization?
Yeah, that's what I'm
fact?
saying. Like looking back now, I kind of figured.
So realized, now you're like, oh, I get.
Yeah. And like this, obviously this is my perception and not necessarily reality. But I feel like I was the one of the ones that was bullied the worst for being gay. And there were other like gay males in my year, but they kind of didn't get the same level. Oh, there's one other person actually I can think of that would have been bullied to the same extent that I was. And so I was just kind of like non-trusting of absolutely everyone. And if anyone was having a conversation with me, it would just be like, why are you talking to me? Are you like trying to like get some information in order to bully me, or in order to like, it was just, there was never any kind of like pure intention behind people having a conversation. But anyway, I remember this one guy, I mean, this is just laughable that I just did not even clock. I was just like, in this conversation. This one guy who was like trying to tell me his musical tastes, and he was telling me about that he'd bought this album from Dana International, who is the winner of Eurovision in the 90s and was famous for being the first trans woman who won Eurovision. And so he was like telling me that he'd bought this album and that he'd been listening to it and he loved it. And I was just like, yeah, it's not really my type of music. I'm not really, so there's nothing I can talk to you about this. And it was like, it was just like him, just really trying to tell me, like really trying to like be like, I am queer.
The biggest, thickest olive branch.
And I was just like,
he's like, please
yeah,
take
I don't
this.
really listen to that kind of music. Yeah, I've got nothing to say. Sorry.
And again, so you were just like saying that like out of sheer protection. You were like, I'm not like it didn't even register in that moment, or you were just like, I'm gonna keep him at a distance.
It wasn't like, oh, he's trying to tell me he's queer. Oh, like scramble. It was just me just genuinely being like, oh yeah, I don't like that kind of music. Oh. I've got nothing to say to you. Sorry.
That just proves, I mean, everyone at their own pace, because God, we are, that is crazy.
Yeah, I just feel so bad for him. I just feel so bad. Like, he just plucked up the courage to talk to me, and I was just like, sorry, no.
Oh my God.
And so was this group then, from school, the group that you went to the first time to Pulse?
It was, yes. So, the gay boys and I were the ones who had the connection to get in through the back and whatnot. And yes, so that was our little group. I think it was only two of us from the actual who were in high school, and I was the only one underage. I think they were both 18. So it was really a mission to sneak me in. But yeah, we did it. And someone else must have been underage to make it such a big hoopla to go through the back door.
You're special.
Or it was just my memory, or my memory just is like, oh my God, I snuck in. So.
And then to like being there, were you just terrified the whole night, or were you able to just enjoy it?
Like I said, I was terrified walking in because I just had this Sodom and Gomorrah fear that I was going to walk into just like a nightmare of sex and be propositioned for sex immediately, and was just so scared because, again, my very
just a side note, don't you wish clubs were like that? Like now?
Well, at the time I didn't, but now I do.
Oh my God, how amazing.
Now I'm like, damn, can't they all be like this? Can't they all be like my worst nightmare when I was 17? Which is now my dream, especially after the pandemic. Damn. But, yeah, so I mean, once I opened that door, I mean, I was fearful of getting kicked out. I had so many other fears of that moment that when the doors opened and I was in and I was like, whoa, I'm in. Yeah, it was nuts. There was no more fears, except the occasional, I would see like a security guard or somebody walk by, and I would be like, making sure they somehow wouldn't know that I was 18 and not 17 or something.
Yes, hiding is non-conspicuous. Yeah.
Just head in the corner. But yeah, so it wasn't scary. It was a very, like I said, just like this, it's just insane, just hearing music that I loved, remix. I mean, just all those minor things that you just never thought about. Like, cause I had gone to so many, teen clubs in high school, also with like my straight girlfriends, which they have in America. So they're designed for 17 and under. And so it's basically a nightclub where, they serve Diet Cokes and regular Cokes and juice and stuff. And they would be like these pop-up things. They were really big in the mid 2000s. And, parents would kind of use them like to babysit their like older kids. So they would drop them off at like the teen club, and then they could go and do like, I don't know the whole backstory of them. But so besides this experience of going to these teen clubs where it would be, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds up to 17, and they're playing edited versions of like, whoever was the popular music, Usher and stuff. And they're playing that kind of, whatever. And it was just very heteronormative. It was like prom all the time. And so just not fun for a queer person, So again, I go into Pulse and I'm like, oh my God, what's this I hear blasting through the speakers? Is this a song that I love? Is this just everything that I love in one place that I didn't know possible? You forget when you're so young and all this time passes, you forget like how important a place like that is. And even just talking about it, I'm like, oh my God, like I can visualize. I wish I could share the visualization of just seeing like the laser lights and like the Catwoman in the corner. And, it's just so crazy. It's just so cool. Smoke machine.
Do you remember talking to anyone? Maybe flirting with people or dancing with strangers on that first night?
That first night, my friend's boyfriend, who was the one who was above 21 and who knew the drag queen, he had a friend who he introduced me to, who I was kind of, even though we were doing something so grown up as going to a club, we were still very high school. So it was very much like, you are going to be set up with this person. Like my best friend was telling me, like, my boyfriend is setting you up with his friend. So like in our fantasies, like we would be double dating and all of this stuff. So I did have someone there who understood that I was 17 and that, like, you know, they were, and I think they were probably 20 years old, but at the time they were, you know, you could have told me they were 70. Yeah. And I would have been like, I believe you. And so they tried to force us together. You know how that goes. Like, they're like, okay, you guys go off and get a drink. You guys go out and smoke a cigarette in the back, or you guys go do this and that. And we just weren't having, it was not a right connection for us. So I decided to kind of leave my post, and you know, we were able to drink, thankfully, at that. You know, that was part of the sneaking in process, was we were able to get our wristbands, our X's or whatever, and drink. So I decided I'm going to get drunk and do what you do in a gay club. So yes, I kissed several people while I was dancing.
Shit.
And
okay, so then before having been there for the first time, had you ever snogged someone?
I had, yes. I actually already had sex. I had sex when I was 15.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this was not, so it was a weird mixture of, like, I was comfortable in certain aspects of my sexuality, but I was very uncomfortable with it on full display. Mm-hmm. And I was very uncomfortable with it in this setting of so many people, seeing me be gay, you know, seeing me. And then of course, once you have the liquor in you, you're like, everybody, look, I'm making out with a, you know, like whoever. And I'm sure I was making out with someone at this point. Like, I'm sure it was someone who was 70 years old. Not just like, oh, I bet you would, like, I was making out with anybody at that point.
Okay. So it's probably like too much to ask if you remember any of those gentlemen.
Yeah, that's too much to ask, because now I'm starting to think of like everyone I've ever kissed in a club, and now it's like I'm having like, I feel almost as if my life was flashing before my eyes.
Oh my God, so. Could you imagine if that actually did happen when your life ended? If every single person you snogged like flashed up in front of your eyes? I'd be like alive for another 6 months.
Well, don't even throw in fucking, like, could you imagine that? I'd be alive for about 4 years. Damn.
So is there anything else then from that first night that stands out in your memory?
You know, I just remember the next day waking up and feeling like, not just like a badass, because like, obviously, like, I snuck into a club, I drank, I was hungover, and you know, you have that experience of all, you all gather with your friends and share your you remember when this happened, and oh my gosh, this happened, you know, and you enjoy all that moment. But it wasn't just that simple thing, because I had done that before. You know, I'd been to high school dances and gotten drunk, club. And we've had those moments, but it was, yes, and teen club. But this was something different, because it was the first time that I was like, oh my God, there are truly people out there like us. Because up until this point, I had seen maybe Jack on Will and Grace, the gay character from Mean Girls, and whoever else was in social, you know, on pop culture at the time. But other than that, it was just side characters. And for once, it was like, oh my God, it's not just me and my 3 gay friends in our school. It's grown-ups, you know, full adults, all the way up to the age of my grandfather at this club. Like, this includes everyone. This is a bigger world than what I expected. I am not alone. And one of my big things about my journey with like being queer, and then having, you know, getting diagnosed with cancer in my 30s, is just the concept of isolation. And so for me, it was so comforting to see that there was no longer isolation. Once I woke up that next morning, I knew in my mind, that club would still be there the next Saturday, even if I wasn't there. You know what I mean? Like, I knew there would always be a place for me now. I just had to wait to turn 18 to legally go in. But that being said, there was a place for me, and I knew it. And I woke up with that excitement, and that excitement beat the hangover, and also being, you know, 17 beat the hangover. But it was just like, wow, there is a place. So it was really, really, waking up the next day was like the coolest hangover I've ever had, you know?
And then, so did you find that did play out then in reality? And the reason I ask this is, like, I had that, you know, so I said before I was surviving, I was just like, I am going to just get through this. And when I get to the end of school and when I become an adult, I can go to gay bars and people will accept me and it will be cool. And then, like, my experience was that I got there and I was like, hi, everyone. Like, hey, I'm here. And then everyone was just like, oh yeah, what else? And I like didn't I didn't find my tribe, I suppose.
Okay.
So that's kind of the reason that I'm asking. Like, did you feel that way? That it was just like, yes, I belong. This is where I should be.
Oh, that's a nice nuanced question. I really appreciate that. Actually, I would say that I did not feel that feeling of like I found my tribe of people. Think I felt more this overall sense that there is a place that I belong. And I think that I had the benefit and the luxury and the privilege of having my friends who were my age, who were also gay, act as my tribe for that time. So I wasn't seeking out an active tribe, for instance, in the nightlife scene. So my tribe was already with me, with my friends from high school who were, sneaking in and doing all that stuff with me. So the feeling of like, oh, I've connected with my tribe wasn't there. It was the feeling of there's a space that I know I can go to that is not just queer friendly, but specifically for queer people. So it was less finding my tribe. I didn't find a tribe until probably I moved to Los Angeles. That's a whole nother topic of being accepting in the gay community and not judging someone by their looks, and a whole nother battle of dealing with that.
Can we talk about that, or should we not?
I mean, if you want to, I want to.
Well, so what do you mean about not being accepted for your looks?
Well, I moved to Los Angeles, which is where I'm at now, and I live very close to West Hollywood, which is, of course, one of the gay centers, at least in America, very well known for, the Abbey and whatnot. But it also has a reputation for being a very close-minded, cis, white, muscular, masculine-leaning side, type of person is what's celebrated in the West Hollywood community. Obviously, as years go on and we diversify and are more inclusionary, this changes. But even when I moved here to LA, 9 years ago, and I went to West Hollywood, I felt what you're saying, the feeling you're talking about. That's how I felt coming into West Hollywood, saying, even though I'm 6'5" and I have all these great traits and whatever, I still didn't have masculinity, and I didn't have a six-pack, and a lot of people value that.
I'm just really hairy as well. That was always my problem. Like, just all these, just hairless bodies. I just don't understand.
I do not understand either, and yeah, I mean, it's a lot of upkeep. I know a few people who do like laser and all that stuff. I'm fairly hairy too, but it doesn't, yeah, it's a weird world out there.
Because like if you get waxed, right?
Yes.
How often do you have to do that?
I mean, I don't really know. I would imagine you'd have to do it at least once a month, right?
Just like, who can be bothered?
I mean, some of these guys can really be bothered.
But I guess what I'm talking about is like the people who are just born without hair anywhere. Like it's fascinating.
That is wild.
It's fascinating. I'm sorry if I'm offending anyone out there. I'm just fascinated.
No, I mean, it's not offensive. It is a fascinating thing. And it's kind of lucky if you fit into the stereotype, because then if you can throw a six-pack in and act masculine, then you can waltz into the Abbey and skip to the front of the line. So
in that context then, when you got there 9 years ago, how do you navigate that culture when there's no obvious place for you?
I mean, I don't know if I knew how to navigate it, and I don't know if I knew that's what I was getting myself into. So I think it was a learning curve. I think I learned, I think from 17, 18, 19, there was no learning curve, because I was very much in that youthful mindset of I'm just going to surround myself with my friends. And it was more about getting wasted and partying and just making out. I wasn't trying to like have a boyfriend or hook up with someone. So I didn't have, even though I'd already had, I've already had sex with people in my age, I wasn't quite ready to, I wasn't going out to seek partners or anything like that. I was going out with friends. So I don't think until I hit, 21, 22, when I started to be more interested in, also having my own place and being able to bring people home and all of that, I think that's when I realized, people care about when you take off your shirt, they're going to judge you based on, you have more hair than I expected. Like you seem so, like my arms are very light hair, and I used to be much blonder when I was younger. And so, maybe would think I would be a twink, or they would think whatever they thought I would be, or because I'm 6'5", they thought maybe I'd be this giant, dominant, masculine man, or whatever the case is. That's when I learned that it can't, for all the positivity and all the inclusionary, it can be very judgmental and not inclusive too. So that was that kind of journey of that. Luckily, during the first few years of exploring Pulse and nightlife, because I spent my, obviously sneaking in 17 and then countless weekends there, but I spent my 18th, 19th, and 20th birthday at Pulse as well. Like, it was very, it was very part of my growing up process. So those first 3 years, it was just all about the acceptance of the community, of like having a place to go. It was less about feeling like I fit in on that level. I hit 21, 22, then that's when body image issues, not feeling good enough as the next person, all of that kind of came with growing up,
So then are you saying that Pulse wasn't that type of place where you were made to feel othered by people if you didn't fit a particular stereotype? Or are you saying that because of the group that you were with, you were a bit oblivious to that?
Oh, I was first going to say exactly to the first one, but I think now that you said the oblivious part, I think you nailed it. I think it was a beautiful mixture of the two. I think I was perfectly just oblivious enough, but my faded memories of being able to chat with so many diverse people in this nightclub, and I was living in the town that I living in was small enough that I was not used to seeing, minorities, for instance. So just being able to go to Pulse and have like a Latino night where they're playing different music than I'm used to, even though I live in Florida, which is, there's Miami there and all of that stuff. It's still, like I said, it's so small-minded that Pulse was inclusionary for a lot of people, beyond just, it was a safe place, but I was also oblivious. That's the short version of that very long winding answer.
Isn't it just wonderful when you're in that oblivious bubble of like naivety and youth? Don't you wish that could just like hang around?
I do miss it often. And I wish there was a pill we could take for it just to feel it.
Well, just that like when you're like 18 and this is going to sound really hackneyed and patronizing, but where you're just like, well, of course, this is really simple. I'm just going to do this and then I'll do this and then everything will be fine. And then, yeah, as you get older, you're like, there's just no point. I'm crap. I'm rubbish. Why am I bothering?
Well, I definitely, and that's why Pulse is such a, beyond the history and the tragedy that it will have in American life and queer life for a long time. Beyond all of that, it was such a special place for me. And you summed it up. It was this time in my life. It represented that bubble of night. How do you say that word? Naivety?
Oh no, now you've just thrown me off. Naivety.
Yeah. Naivety. Yeah. So I'm not saying that word again, but that bubble, it did represent that bubble, and it did represent my youth in a lot of way. And it welcomed me into the queer community. And I wonder if I wasn't welcomed. And again, I realized the privilege I had with my friends and being able to sneak in and all of this safety that I had around me. But, I wonder if I didn't have such an amazing experience, would I not have the confidence that I have today? Would I not be as proudly queer as I am today? There's just so many factors that you just will never know. And so I'm so grateful that I had that experience at Pulse, and being young and dumb and full of cum and just ready to dance and party. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful time. And it really is a beautiful space. And I don't want my dumbness and my oblivion to counteract the fact that it really was. There were all shapes and sizes there. There were all ages there. I remember chatting up someone truly with, full white hair and white beard, little pot belly and a cane. I remember chatting up so many different types of people there. And, it's a special place.
So, like picking up on what you said about being young, dumb, and full of cum, and also knowing that you had your 18th, 19th, and 20th birthday parties there, are there any like particularly messy nights that you might want to tell me about?
I mean, there were several messy nights. One that comes to mind specific is getting kicked out of Pulse, my beloved Pulse, my home away from home, for being so belligerent that I refused to not only not stop smoking cigarettes, but continued to smoke cigarettes and tried to prove a point by inside and tried to prove a point by lighting 4 cigarettes at once in my mouth. And then I had thought I was such a badass that I drove there before and I was like, I'm just going to park my car in the street and it'll be fine. So I parked it at some little like shop next door. And then when I got kicked out, my car had been towed. I was wasted. I couldn't find my friends. I had flipped a table. I got a temporary ban. They forgot about the ban. It wasn't that serious, thank God. But they told me I wasn't allowed to come back. But I was back the next weekend, so don't worry. And yeah, that was the most that I remember. Only because I don't remember it, but I remember it through my friends telling me about it. And they did love the part where I stuck 3 more cigarettes in my mouth and tried to light them all at once and started to cough. And then they said, no more, please get out. And then I had to get my parents involved to get my car back. And, it became a multi-day process. So that was probably the most memorable or messy. But
okay, so I need to ask a safety related question here.
Yeah, please do.
You drove there and then you got wasted. Were you planning on driving home?
No, I was planning on leaving my car at this. Well, I'm going to say the name. It's called a Dunkin' Donuts. Okay. I don't know if that's global or international or whatever.
I know what it is. Yeah.
Anyway, so the point is, it's a 24-hour donut shop. So I thought I was this genius who was going to leave my car parked there overnight and meet up with my friends. And my friends, who lived in Orlando, we would all ride back, with the designated driver, crash in Orlando overnight. And then in the morning, come pick up our cars at the 24-hour donut shop. Because I thought, it's 24 hours, they'll never notice. Well, it's right next door to a nightclub. And every other person had this idea to crowd their parking lot with cars for the night. So we all got towed. And so it was my plan because I wasn't able to ride up with everyone. So I was like, don't worry, I'll just park it overnight. And lesson learned, I have not done that again.
Well, at least you had a plan and you weren't going to drink and drive. And that's not something that we condone.
Oh, gosh, no. Oh, my God. No, there was, not a...
But, one of the best things about going out, dancing all night and getting really sweaty is then going to like a kebab shop or a Dunkin' Donuts or somewhere afterwards and like reconvening with your friends. Are there any stories from the Dunkin' Donuts that you can share?
There are stories from the Dunkin' Donuts.
There was a DJ in the bathroom, wasn't there?
How are you so perceptive about that? I will say I did meet someone, like I said, I wasn't exploring my full-on sexuality. I wasn't comfortable with like hooking up with guys quite yet that I didn't know. So I wasn't to that place mentally, but I did take a guy over to the Dunkin' Donuts and we did go into the bathroom after shutdown happened. And it was because it's crowded. The Dunkin' Donuts is crowded. And we did continue on in the bathroom for, what felt like an eternity, but was probably truly about 60 seconds of the sloppiest, most tequila making out before I ordered a giant chocolate donut and, I don't know, puked out the backseat of my friend's window as they drove me home.
So you stopped making out with this guy so you could have a chocolate donut?
I'm sure. I can't tell you that's what happened because I can't remember, but I'm sure that, knowing me, I'm sure that is the series of events.
Did it have sprinkles?
I'm sure. Knowing me, it probably had sprinkles.
Okay, well, I think, I can understand why you'd have that decision-making process.
When you're wasted, it's like, is it sex or is it food? And sometimes it is food.
Why can't it be both?
But sometimes you can only keep when I'm talking when like one eye is staying open and it's like you got your choice is like you can either hook up with this guy in the bathroom or you can eat the donut, and I'm proud to say I chose donut.
So this is a bit of a sharp segue, but do you remember hearing about the oh God, I was going to say the incident, but that sounds really like polite. The attack.
You can call it the shooting.
The attack. Yeah. Where were you living at that time? Were you in LA?
I was in LA, yes. And I remember it very vividly. It was my dear friend's wedding in Northern California in a beautiful vineyard area. And I was there doing her makeup, as I'm a makeup artist and her friend. So it was my wedding gift to her. And I woke up, we had a beautiful wedding ceremony. I believe it was that Saturday night that it occurred. And I didn't hear anything of it, except I was on California time and I got all these calls from the East Coast that I woke up because I was crashing on a couch after the wedding. And so around what would have been maybe 3 or 4 a.m. California time, I started to get these messages from people who were waking up to the news. Because, a lot of my friends had already moved out of the Orlando area. So I wasn't getting live updates through the night, but I was getting the people who were waking up, like my mom, who woke up at, 7 a.m. So that's 4 a.m. LA time, texting. I was checking on my cousin who is also gay. My first cousin who lives in Florida, who also would go to Pulse with me. He was a few years younger than me, so he was behind. He wouldn't go to Pulse with me during these times that I'm sharing with you, but he would frequent Pulse regularly with his now husband, who was also Latino. And it was, famously it was a Latino night. And so we had that worry of trying to find Luis and Chase and finding out to make sure they weren't in the club, because they would frequent Latino night, once a month, because it was a very fun night to be a part of. So I had that personal issue of worrying about people that I know. And like I said, most of my friends had left Orlando. So it was mainly my cousin that I had to worry about, and then just friends of friends. And so I was fielding these phone calls just in absolute disbelief, because then I remember reading the horrific reports of how it occurred. But I just remember the design of Pulse and the design of the space. And it just is nothing that you can't think of, but how horrible it must be, because that place is knowing the layout of it, it's so small and there's not a lot of exits. And I know that because I've been in through the back one. And so hearing that and thinking that and seeing it blasted on the news and seeing it, and it was Pride in LA was I think the same day. Like, I think it happened Saturday, and then West Hollywood's Pride was that Sunday, the very next day. And it was the debate of if they were going to keep it, if they were going to shut it down because they were afraid of more attacks. Like, I mean, it was just so much. And then I remember seeing on Facebook that, one of my friends had their friend die. And then I was like, holy shit, like, this is very close to home. This isn't just, okay, thank God my cousin wasn't there with his husband. Okay, we're good. This is now, I'm seeing my friends post the links to their friends' funeral memorial services. And I'm seeing this all on my timeline. I'm not searching for this. I'm not looking to find out who are the people who passed away during this horrific mass shooting attack. I'm seeing it on my own feed in real time, seeing these updates, seeing people marking themselves as safe from the, on Facebook, you have the option to say, I'm safe from this event. Seeing that happen, people asking me, forgetting that I moved to LA. You know how it is. It's a big world. Some people fall out of touch with you and forget you moved to LA. They're texting you out of the blue. Where were you? Are you okay? It was very, very, it was just so in your face. So it was consuming that day. And I had to drive back I rode back with my friends to LA from Northern California that day, that Sunday that it happened. And I just sat on my phone and I couldn't cry. I couldn't process it. And until I got home, it was about a 6-hour car ride. And I just sat there reading news stories, sharing things, posting about it, talking about it, making sure I'm safe, just consumed. And then I finally got home. And when I shut my bedroom door, dropped off my luggage, by my closet. And that was, I just lost it for the rest of the night, because it just was like finally sunk in. It was truly, truly traumatizing. No other way to say it, just traumatizing. And then for the people involved, even more so.
And then moving through the weeks that came after, how did that feel?
It was hard because a lot of people connected, again, via social media, people through, you have to remember, I was part of the theater society community in the outskirts of Orlando. So that included a lot of schools, a lot of high schools. So for all the three of us who went to Pulse from my school. There were so many other queer kids from the theater programs of other high schools that would go to Pulse. Again, it was 18 and up most nights. So we connected, we reconnected on digital platforms. And that was nice in a way, because it's nice to connect after something so horrifying and just so awful. But it's also a downside connecting, because you're constantly thinking about it over and over. And even though I didn't have a direct involvement, it was such I can't remember that term, but like that when something happens, like when a celebrity dies and you feel the world feels the mourning, it was that same feeling. Like I would wake up feeling as if I had gone through that same experience. And that's not to belittle the people who went through the experience, because trust me, that nothing will compare to what they endured. And, but you still can relate, especially if you've been to that nightclub, because you just know everything about it. You know the layout, you know how it must sound to hear those sounds of gunfire. And it's just, it was just a hard thing. And then I had to go back to Florida by the end of summer. And by that point, Pulse was memorialized. And I was able to go and pay my respects and visit what Pulse had become, which was a memorial.
And so what was that like?
Devastating. Even I probably visited in September, October after the shooting, which happened, I believe it was June 2016. So a few, fall, and it was still packed. There was people lined up to walk by. People, by this point, so many artists had dropped off renderings. So many beautiful sculptures had been made. It was just so beautiful. A hodgepodge of memories of these people. And you see notes written from their loved ones. You see drawings by people who don't know them, who wanted to sketch them. I just remember this one painting, or not a painting, but a sketching. And it was framed of just a girl looking down and just an outline of a single teardrop. And she just said, and it just had in script, "We will love you forever. We will never forget you. We will never forget you." And it was just like, I mean, it's just devastating. It's just devastating. There's no words for it. There's no way to express it. It's something that I've never experienced. Even though I lived in America for my whole life, I've yet to experience a mass shooting, which seems rare at this point, given the fact that we have one almost every day. And I wasn't even directly affected by it, and it still felt so directly affected. And that memorial is, I try to honor every year. I post that same portrait of that picture that I took, because, you just don't want to forget those people who were there just trying to have a good time, like I was when I was 17. And it's just like, fuck, man.
So I'm going to return to a question that I asked at the top of the interview, which is, what do you think Orlando has lost?
I think Orlando has truly lost a piece of its queer soul. You know what I'm saying? Like how cities have these places and have these things that are just part of their history and part of what makes them magical. And I know Pulse, it was like that for not just me, but for so many people. And I think without it, the void is one less safe place that queer people can go to, and especially one for young queer people. So it's just this void. It's just this queer void left that will never be, it's irreplaceable because of the tragedy that impacted it. So I don't know what Orlando's lost from it besides a piece of its heart and soul and a feeling of safety that all of us in the queer community have. And I'm happy that there are other gay bars that are thriving now, obviously, 5-6 years later. But there will never be another. And I'm sure people will always be looking over their shoulder or be a little bit more tense in Orlando as they go out now. And that's a disappointing way to end that thought process of what Orlando's lost. But it's lost a sense of safety, and it's lost a piece of its queer soul.
Do you have any memories of Pulse that you would like to share? Well, if you do, I would love to hear from you. Find me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter with the user handle Lost Spaces Pod, and let me know what you got up to there and why it has such a special place in your heart. And if you're not on social media, you can find me at my website, lostspacespodcast.com, and leave a comment there. I would love to hear from you. You can also follow Jared on Instagram. His user handle is Jared Lips, and give a little listen to his podcast as well, which is called Back on Air and is available to stream wherever you find podcasts, which is probably what you're listening to this on right now. Lost Spaces is not only a podcast, but a concept record as well. I have been writing songs about queer venues and the people who used to live their lives there, and will be releasing songs over the coming year. You can hear the first single, Well Grown Boys, which is also playing underneath my talking right now on all streaming platforms. If you liked this episode, I would really appreciate if you subscribed, left a review on Apple Podcasts, or just told people who you think might be interested in giving it a little listen to. I am Kay Anderson, and you have been listening to Lost Spaces.